So I'm sorry about that. I didn't realize we were running already. Welcome, everyone. We had some technical difficulties that we wanted to ensure we worked out. But welcome to the Agile Genesis YouTube Live. Today, we're going to be covering distributed Agile, in particular, how to facilitate distributed Agile and how to create. We're going to talk about how can we create visual radiators in a distributed environment. That's one of the questions I get asked the most, right? We're used to visual radiators in Agile. We're used to having boards that when you're walking the office, you're able to assess where you are at any given point, whether you're looking at the burn down, whether you're looking at the Scrum backlog, whether you're looking at any of the artifacts that the teams might share on the wall, that information is radiating. You're able to self-service around understanding where the team is at any given point. The problem with distributed Agile is that that information tends to hide. We have to go find it. Many of us are using programs like Jira. We're using tools like Rally, for example, or you might be using something simpler than that. But in any case, you have to go log in. You have to understand how the program works. You might have to generate some reports. And good luck trying to get the leadership to do that. So a lot of the extra time that we're spending in distributed Agile has to do with status reports, putting them in PowerPoints, going back to those days when we had to prepare what was already prepared. And there are solutions around this. One of the neat tools that I use often is Miro, M-I-R-O. And in Miro, you're able to have an infinite board. You're able to have the ability to create a board that can stretch as much as you want it to. It's literally a canvas, and that is a whiteboard canvas. Now, there's nothing on the canvas, so it's hard to get a perspective, but the neat thing about it is that you can add as much as you like here. That actually works to our advantage. In fact, in many cases, it works better than when we were in the office physically because, well, we don't run out of wall space. I've been to clients and offices where we began to run out of space on the wall for our artifacts, and we started using window spaces. So in some cases, we couldn't even open the windows. So in this case, you don't have that problem. So I want to share some of those techniques that I've been working on for some time now. And as part of what we cover in our class in the Distributed Agile class for Scrum Masters, where a portion of it is dedicated to facilitating and also to how do you handle some of these particular challenges in a distributed environment as you work with your team. So here's Miro, and what Miro allows us to do is to create these elements that become very easy and intuitive for us to use. Now, I could put a sticky up here. I could put different drawings. I can even use a stylus that I have here to draw with it. And the neat thing about it is that if I do something like Agile Genesis and I write that on any one of these items, let's say I write it on a sticky, that might be a better example. If I write it on the sticky and I do Agile Genesis, it actually stretches with the sticky. So it's very intuitive. You see how that can be large, that could be small. And it's very flexible. And I can do as many of these and use it where I'm pasting images. It's just a very intuitive interface. By the way, there are other softwares that do this. For example, Mural. And the reason why I spelled Miro at first is because the two are very similar. Mural is also very good at doing this. I find Miro for personal preferences to be just more intuitive in terms of how you can deal with that infinite canvas. So I want to show you today in a very brief overview some of the things that can help you in creating that visual radiator we talked about. So I have created, for those of you that are familiar with Miro, I've created a personal template. So there are templates in Miro that allow you to create um, items in a faster amount of time. For example, you can have a retrospective board that you just drop in. You can have mind maps and things of that nature. But the neat thing about it is I've um, created a set of personal templates that I shared during our class, and the team members take this with them back to their teams, and they use it as a way of facilitating. It has things, for example, for those of you that are using story mapping, I created a um, quick way to get a story mapping template that allows me to just use these stickies in a way that I can put in the different personas and drop many types of persona at once, and then have the user story mapping exercise with the rest of the class. If any of you were on this board at this point, you would be able to see each other's cursor. So you would see in real time as you make the edits where each person is working, which is also pretty neat. I'm gonna put this one away, and I can do that by just simply undoing. I'm going to go and show you something that I think you'll be very excited about. Is this template that if you're using SAFe, one of the things in SAFe is PI planning, or if you're not particularly using SAFe, you might be doing big room planning. This PI planning template has most of the elements that you would need to carry out the event. It holds an agenda where you can lay out your agenda, whether you're having it in 2 days or you're having multiple day agendas. By the way, in a distributed environment, it's recommended that you have a 3-day agenda where you have half days, so that the teams are able to that they're not suffering from Zoom fatigue as much. You have your program backlog. It does identify the dependencies through the use of strings. These strings move, so you can have them go to different locations, and you can drop any one of your program backlog items here. And you can see how you are able to create this program board in a digital way that in many ways is actually more convenient than the physical one, because this one is something that you can preserve without having to reinsert it into a Jira or any other tool that you might be using. It allows you to roam your risks. It has the team breakout board, so the iterations can be planned. These are deeper dive items that we go in to the class and how you use these, but you do have the ability to make use of that. I'm going to show you one. If you're using Scrum or Scrum at Scale, that will be very, very neat for you to consider. So I created a set here that takes you through most of the elements that you would need in a Scrum implementation. And it takes the sprint approach where you have a whole sprint laid out here, and this will become your board to reference. So I call it the Scrum board, right? Not to be confused with the sprint backlog, which is a subcomponent of this that's in here. So you will start your sprint by, well, let's name the sprint. Let's identify the goal. Let's have the team members so that anybody can visit this board knows who is involved in this particular sprint and this team. And then if we have subject matter experts that are going to be participating, let's identify those. We have a schedule where we know when that is going to occur, right? You see here some of the events being identified. And then we have the agenda. These are placeholders, by the way, and it's meant to be edited depending on the team. So here we would have, if we have a refinement session, well, when is that? If we're going to do it as a team, and what is the link? What is the URL? So now there's no getting lost trying to understand where you're going to be zooming or clicking on a team meeting to attend. All this information is here for everybody and preserved. You see that I've added pretty much the sprint related events, but there are other items here, things like happy hour. for example, right? So consider that, because it's a nice way to organize everybody without having to get confused. One of the things about distributed Agile is that we must all be clear in terms of the meeting places, the artifacts, and the team agreements. I'm going to cover a little bit of that as well. But here is the sprint planning board, and this just allows us to have, again, that visual. So all the team members will come here. We will have our sprint goal, our product goal written out, so that it guides us as we try to move the goal forward in the next sprint. And we have our proposed sprint goal and our committed sprint goal. We would negotiate back and forth among the team until we have a committed sprint goal. So we always start out with a proposal, and then as a team, we agree to what we want to create. Then there are the product backlog items, and we take each product backlog item, we move it here, and we decompose them. The team might be tasking, and if you're tasking, this is a great canvas for the team to be able to do that, right? The assumption is that these product backlogs have been refined already, and we're going through the why, the what, and the how of the sprint planning session. Once we have that, then we go back to, we come down to the committed backlog. These are the items that we agreed that we would be doing during the what session, and we decompose those. So you see that we have the product backlog items along with their tasks, right? This is now committed. Another great thing about the digital world here is that we can copy these, so we can leave a trail. We don't have to move the stickies and maybe not be able to reconstruct where we left off in some of these cases, right? User story mapping, I showed you that template. Here it is again, right? So if you want to have a user story mapping as part of your activities, you can do that. It includes things like the release burn down. This is an artifact that you can use and you can put in there. By the way, these can be linked back to Jira so that you don't have to copy these and put them in Jira, or vice versa, copy them from Jira one at a time and bring them here. There are ways that allow you to link your items here directly to your Jira tickets. That is part of the instructions that we provide in the class, but do know that you have that option, which is another beautiful aspect of this. If there are any urgent items that come up, maybe your team has an urgent lane, well, here's where you can host that, right? So again, just giving you the space depending on what your particular processes are within your team, right? Your sprint backlog, now most sprint backlogs are a little more elaborate than this, so it's very easy to add the different columns based on your workflow and in the different lanes, right? Your sprint burn down, again, it can update here and allow you to gather around during your daily scrum so that you can see your sprint burn down in a real-time or close to real-time fashion, so that you're always tracking the big picture, the sprint goal, right? Fun area, it's very important that in a distributed environment, we also have fun so that we can connect and build that social capital. These are some clip arts, but you get the idea. This is an area where the team can get a little silly and have a little fun, right? We have also the sprint review. And the sprint review is not meant to be a slideshow. This is just for us to be able to have that feedback mechanism during the sprint review where we can actually take a snapshot of what we just showed and put it up there along with the product backlog item that it related to or the increment as a whole, and then just begin to collect feedback from the stakeholders and have conversations, right? So it has additional items that you can collect, such as action items that result from the session, and bring that back into the product backlog. So it's got a discussion board. It's giving you whiteboard space if you need to customize any of that based on how you are used to running your sprint review. And then based on that, well, you're going to have two aspects, right? You're going to have the dates in which you're planning to deliver the actual increment, and that is when if you're dealing with software, for example, when do you make that available in production? But it might have a toggle that it's off, and that could be a different date. That might be the release date when you turn that toggle on. So it's just making a separation of those two, right? And above all, making sure that we're all aligned in terms of the dates. It might be today, the day in which we have the sprint review, that these have been delivered and are also released. It might be that they were already delivered and released, but in any case, you have the space here, and that depends on you and how you use it. The updated release burn down is giving you the opportunity to update it based on these days. So now you have where you were and where you are. Remember that this is meant to be throughout the course of a sprint. So you might have a 2-week period here. You might have a 3-week period. You might have a shorter period, but it is not something that you update on a single day for the most part, right? It is something that you use as your guiding information radiator and artifact holder that the team can huddle around. Right. So there's also a sprint retrospective, which is a neat, here's a team canvas. And this team canvas allows you to remember who you are as a team, to emphasize why you exist, what are our goals, what are our values, what are our strengths. It is a neat thing because, well, we tend to get caught in the daily work and sometimes forget the bigger picture. This is a really neat way for us to continue to align as a team. And the retrospective is a great time to do that, right? And then it has a retrospective standard, what went well, what needs to improve, what are the next steps. You can change this as you would like to run your retrospective for that particular sprint. I personally like to have a new retrospective style every sprint. So there's plenty of room to do that. If you're not using this one, you can click on it and delete it. And then there are the commitments. So the new Scrum Guide that was released in December of 2020 has found a home for some of the things that were somewhat important before, but didn't have a name or a category. Well, now we have what we call commitments, right? And some of these commitments include things like the definition of done. What is your definition of done? So let's put that up there, and let's make sure that that is something that we look at often and that we try to expand it as much as possible. It might be that we have at the sprint level, we might have it for the release, we might have various ways to define that definition of done, depending on. We might have a definition of ready. This is, by the way, not core Scrum, but the idea that we need to also align in terms of when is a product backlog item ready to be picked up by the team, by the developers. And that may contain things like the description has been prioritized, the item has an acceptance criteria, it includes a value, and of course it has been estimated. Oh, there's a little bit of a typo there, sorry about that. And the working, very, very important that we have a working agreement as an distributed agile team, and that we revisit our working agreement, and the rules of the game have changed, so to speak. So we go through a whole module in our class in terms of the elements and the examples and what are important considerations when creating a working agreement, and have an exercise around that. Because again, when can you contact team members? How can you contact team members? Along with an entire set of categories that play a role in making sure that we're working effectively. In fact, more effectively remotely than how we worked when we were in the office or when we were physically co-located. Okay, so I want to share that with you. That was a quick walkthrough of a Scrum board, a PI planning board, and also we saw some examples as far as additional templates that can be used, such as storyboard mapping. Hope you enjoy that. We'll be having more of these sessions. If you'd like to understand more and be more efficient at working with a distributed agile team, make sure to check out our class at agilgenesis.com, where we will be covering much of this and a lot more in detail. Okay, thank you very much.